Hello, you are listening to the Gamer Librarian Podcast, the best podcast you can find on this side of the multiverse. I am your host, Adrian, and today I will be talking about the novel In the Miso Soup by Ryo Murakami, my playthrough of Final Fantasy XVI, and more. Afterwards, be sure to subscribe to be notified when future episodes are released, and show your support by liking and leaving a comment. Thank you for joining. Now, let me get apologies out of the way for this episode arriving pretty late as opposed to when I normally want to drop episodes by Fridays or the weekends. For this episode, I wanted to have fully completed my first playthrough of Final Fantasy XVI before release. It was quite a long game, and I wanted to express my opinions in one episode rather than get it in multiple parts. With that, let's talk about FF16, which, in my opinion, is probably the best Final Fantasy you could play out there on any console. I believe it's only on PS5 though, so that's pretty disappointing. But I love the combat. It's what made me immediately fall in love with the game from the start, and it's what's driving my current playthrough of New Game Plus is the combat. The combat is really in depth. The story and world building are also incredible, while maybe being bogged down by lengthy cutscenes and kind of lackluster traversal for its larger zoned areas. I still find myself captivated by the characters in the game like Clive, Joshua, and even the ever changing villains that are nefarious and deadly right up to the final boss, Ultima, in the game. Now, the villains are definitely something spectacular in this game because they are quite a few of them. I think there's a lot of villains in this story rather than the heroes. But even so, like the villains are very complex because their motivations are very human, opposed to like the final boss Ultima, who's like a god. Not spoilers for Final Fantasy. Obviously, you fight a god by the end of the game. That's no spoiler. But the game feels like it's a mix between Attack on Titan and Game of Thrones, where with Game of Thrones you have that kind of multi-character expanding narrative from like different perspectives of these people in clans or countries or nations, and they're either warring together or fighting each other or trying to do some kind of goal within this world. And you see the politics ever change. This game has one of those like character trees of how the characters relate, not just the main characters and their friends, but like how this side character knows this side character and what their relationship is. It'd be cool to get a picture of it on screen for you guys. I'm going to try to do that before the episode drops, but I don't really have a lot of ability to transfer those kind of things. But the game is extensive with its characters list and its lore. It's a very history-centered game. It kind of puts a lot on you to kind of know the setting and the story if you care about that. But it's very fulfilling. It feels like a world that these people have lived in, and these events are larger than life and they're meaningful. While this game also feels like it's like Attack on Titan because the characters in this world, they do have access to magic and like extra human abilities, but when it comes down to your main character Clive and the bosses who are these dominants and these icon holders, they're the people that turn into the big summon gods that you find in Final Fantasy games. Those are your Attack on Titan characters of these beings, these humans with extraordinary powers that use them at a cost of usually someone else's life. I mean, these are destructive god abilities that are used for nations in power to subjugate will onto other people or nations trying to take over larger nations. I really don't want to go into big spoilers because it's really incredible to see this kind of story play out for a Final Fantasy game. They've never really done that before, at least in terms of the more modern Final Fantasy games. This feels like a very expansive story, and it was a hell of a lot of fun to play. Right up to the very end, like I said, the combat is what really drove this game forward for me because every time you gain a new ability from beating a boss or using your XP to level up and buy a new skill, you change the combat significantly. You're able to do a lot more and a lot more succession and with a lot more planning if you really want to plan out how you want to take out enemies, groups of enemies, bosses. Really, it was just a hell of a lot of fun to play this game. And I liked it a lot more than FF15 just because the combat was definitely there. I won't compare the story. I never played FF15's DLC, but I could definitely say that enjoyed the full ride of FF16's story more than 15. And maybe to relate it to a more modern Final Fantasy remake, Final Fantasy VII remake, with Cloud and Tifa. Those games are good in their own right. It's a good remake compared to the original FF7, but 16 takes that combat and blows it out of the park. I mean, the combat in this game is leagues better and more enjoyable and just more reactive than the combat you find in FF7 remake. And like I said probably in that last episode that I hope that they take this combat and use that for the basis of FF7 and not just kind of build on FF7's combat. But either way, it really doesn't matter to me because they're still a hell of a lot of fun. And but the FF16 does have some qualms for me. There was quite a few things that I thought were not needed or definitely just in the way when you wanted to do them. Now, some of them was like the side quests in this game. There is an abundance of side quests, and it may not be as much as most other games like Skyrim or the Assassin's Creed games, but for a Final Fantasy game, the amount of side quests is pretty lengthy because they're not only encompassing with their own lengthy dialogue and cutscenes stuff, but they're usually out of the way. A lot of times you can't go to the side quest mission area because the story has locked that area for you, which is a shame. But I think on once you finish the game, you get to do all the side quests at the same time or get a chance to do them in New Game Plus. But even then, the rewards for the side quests aren't that much. You get a pittance of XP, like a few hundred. Sometimes it might be 100. I've seen XP be like in 35 or 50 XP gains, depending on the side quest. Rarely any items, which this game isn't really heavy reliant on that. You get a lot of items in this game, and only so few slots since you only have one character in your party, which is all right, I suppose. When you look at it like that, they're not really going to bog you down with all these items and inventory management, but it felt like you weren't getting a lot out of the reward system for that. And some of this stuff you do get rewarded from. You get like these crafting materials that could be used to make better swords and other equipment, which is kind of okay. I don't know the full extent of it, but when I finally finished the game, I had the Defender Plus sword, which gave me like 700 or 800 damage around the time. And I don't think that's the strongest sword because the game tells you that you could build the ultimate weapon if you do Final Fantasy mode, which I didn't do. It's like hard mode, but that was the sword I used by the end of the game. That it did pretty good. Okay, I was mowing down enemies. The damage was pretty nice. So I don't think that was a big issue, but it definitely felt like when it came to doing the side quests and the exploration, it was tedious to travel. The fast travel system it's there. You have a main map with the main continent world map, and then you have the smaller sub areas, which the sub areas are okay. They're very bleak looking. They're not all that great to kind of hang around in. Um, and then traversal, besides the chocobo, running is abhorrent. It takes Clive a little bit longer to start his run animation in certain areas. You can't run all the time. You can only do it when you're fully out in the open, which is kind of a misstep, I think, in my opinion, because a lot of these quests require walking back and forth, and there's only so few fast travel points in these larger zones that depending on when you do a certain side quest or a series of side quests, you're probably adding in an extra 5, 10 plus minutes to your game time, which I don't think is that terrible, but when you think about FF16's already extenuous runtime with its cutscenes and everything else, it definitely feels like a drag, which is okay. Sometimes people want to take the time to go and do those side quests and go and search for the secrets and things like that. If I see them on the way of doing the main stuff and it doesn't seem like it would be out of my way, I would obviously go and do them. But at some point in the game, it definitely starts giving you far too many side quests to be like, okay, I know I'm in like the final stretch of the story acts. I should just finish out the story and just worry about the side quests maybe later. But I don't think I'm ever going to do the side quest. Not all of them. They have these bounty boards which are like these cool boss enemy encounters, which you can find. There's like an S rating one that I found. At the time, I was like level 38, and the boss was level 45. I never got to beat him, but now that I beat the game around level 47, I'm going to try and do a new game plus. Hopefully, I can beat those characters and those enemies in a relatively quick fashion. But for the gameplay, which I want to take a little bit moment to talk about, is it's where the game really shines. And maybe not in every single combat encounter is the same, because there's like world encounters, like overworld stuff where you'll just find the same mini enemies and minions, stuff like that. And there's story encounters, which you obviously have to go and do. And the boss battles is the pinnacle, the cream of the crop for this game. The boss battles, it needs to be mentioned how crazy these battles get. And they're fairly simple. What like the more extravagantness of it is fairly simple. When Clive turns into Ifrit, the summon that you get to be in the game, the gameplay gets a little simplified by then, but it's flashy, it's chaotic, it's cinematic, and sure, there's like quick time events and button prompts you have to be kind of aware of during cutscenes, which I don't think are that bad. I think it just enhances the cinematic intenseness of it. You can't make every single combat encounter be new or different from every single one, but I think that's fine. I think the Ifrit fights are good. But when you fight as Clive against any number of the bosses, uh, uh, the one I really really just did most was Ultima, because that fight has like 4 or 5 stages to it, which is incredible. The Odin fight is also really crazy. Fighting him is really hard. He has like a insta kill move. I'm pretty sure it felt like I only got hit by it once, and I was like, never getting hit by that again, and I didn't. So I don't know if it's really insta kill, but it did kill me in one go. Um, yeah, it's a really fun game. Compared to a lot of the other Final Fantasy games I think that are out there. I would equate this game to be just as good as my favorite Final Fantasy game, FF Final Fantasy X. I think that was the best Final Fantasy game at the time and still is, right up here with FF16. Um, 7 is good, but it is a more turn-based game, so like I don't think combat and gameplay can be really like critiqued based on these newer titles. FF7 Remake obviously can be, like I just did, but I really look forward to seeing what Final Fantasy does in the future now, because we're going to get Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, which is part two of the remake. That seems like it's going to be a bonkers ride, an absolute bonkers ride. And FF17 will probably come out within like 8 or 10 years. Maybe Final Fantasy 14 will get more expansion updates and things like that. But yeah, this game was really fun, and I'm looking forward to finishing out New Game Plus. I'll probably just skip a majority of the cutscenes that I've already seen and skip side quests. I'll only probably do the monster hunt boards and build the ultimate weapon. And then I'm definitely want to see what the boss fights and the Ultima fight is like on New Game Plus. Something really cool that New Game Plus doesn't let you, or it doesn't force you to do the very beginning of the game. Once the introduction of the game is done and you have like the segmented, oh, this is the current like year that the game takes place in when you're older Clive, the game really picks up. So you can just start the game off right there on New Game Plus. You don't have to watch the first like 8 hours of cutscenes the game does give you, which is good, which is really good. While we're on the topic of video games, I will give you guys a sneak peek into the game I'll be playing throughout the week, and hopefully we'll finish before next episode is released, and that's going to be Warhammer Space Marine. This is a game, part of the Warhammer franchise that I'm sure some of you are probably familiar with. But this is a game that's been on my list for quite a while to play. I've always seen it in the shelves of GameStop when I was younger, and I was always interested in this particular game specifically. And ever since then, I've never really gotten into Warhammer, save for my friends showing me some stuff on them and playing the Rogue Trader tabletop game. And this is my first ever fully fledged Warhammer game that I will finish from start to finish. And I'm extremely excited. The Space Marines seem like a cool bunch of people to play as, and In this game, you kill specifically orcs, which seems pretty fun. And you guys should leave a comment if you'd like me to read a Warhammer novel or play other future Warhammer games in the channel. I have a list currently that I definitely want to try and get through, so keep an eye on that. I'm definitely becoming a bigger fan of Warhammer. I love the lore. I think the lore is pretty cool. The way that humanity is in this state for the Warhammer franchise is really interesting, and all the Xenos, all the aliens, all the mythos and stuff like that, really captivating. Definitely becoming a Warhammer fan, and what I am looking forward to is Warhammer Rogue Trader, the video game, coming out by Owlcat Games. I'm sorry I've mentioned it before, but yeah, that's gonna be the next game I'm talking about next week, hopefully. So stay tuned for that episode. Now, let's get into the main topic that I wanted to talk about this episode, and that is the book I recently finished called In the Miso Soup by Ryo Murakami. And this was a definitely a weirder kind of pick. I'm not sure how much you guys are going to enjoy this kind of story, but In the Miso Soup is a tale of a 20-year-old Kenji, a Japanese nightlife guide for foreigners. He navigates tourists around sex clubs and hostess bars of Tokyo. One night, he receives a phone call from an American named Frank who seeks to have his services. While Kenji has promised time for his girlfriend around this time, he chooses to show Frank the sex scene of Tokyo. And during his tour, Kenji becomes increasingly aware of Frank's odd behavior. And this is a extremely interesting book to me because I think it definitely shines a light into a lot of things that humanity or society doesn't necessarily delve upon, and that's like the acceptance of um, sex and how we go about gaining sex and the lengths we would go to have sex. And this is definitely a more mature topic. I'll try not to go into gritty details, but it's a thriller, suspense novel. I would say it's short, only maybe 250 pages or so, at least on the format that I had, and it was extremely interesting to read. The characters are pretty interesting. Kenji's a decent narrator kind of guy to follow, but Frank is the crux of the story. It's him that's like the rents in the works, where any interaction with Frank is either off the walls or just bizarre, and it only gets crazier and crazier from there. But this is a cool book. It definitely shows off a lot of differences between at least American and the Japanese sides of society when it comes to tourism and sex, because it's something that I think everybody can relate to. Either wanting to see the world and see new places and meet new people, and also have new experiences, whether it's sexual in nature or not. It compares the facility that not a lot of prostitution or sexual acts are legalized or promoted in more American culture, while in Japanese culture it's not necessarily frowned upon, but it's definitely not talked about in a positive light. And the kind of people that covet these services are seen as like grungy or perverted people, which is something, you know. It also delves into like more of a person's ethnicity in foreign countries. You can see, since it's Japan, you see a lot of different uh, takes on people that at the city. The character Frank is a white American, while they also mention darker skinned individuals throughout the book for varying reasons. It's not necessarily spewing hate or anything. It just is showing that there's a difference, and that there are people of these different kind of ethnicities there in this country, and that's pretty cool. I definitely enjoyed to see that kind of representation in there. Um, didn't felt any type of way of force or anything. It just felt needed to be in the story, and I thought it was interesting. I thought it was interesting. It kind of made me want to go and experience the sex scene that would be in Japan, to a degree, but it was fun. It was a book that I thought would have been worse on my first read, but I was captivated from the beginning. I really wanted to see what this guy Frank's deal was, and it definitely turned into a mystery thriller by the end of it. and I think it was a good read. I put it up there with like The Ring, which I just finished a few weeks ago, and that was also a really good read. Another solid Japanese novel that I thought was incredible. And if there's a movie for this, I hope you guys maybe check it out or read the book. Obviously, please go check out the book In the Miso Soup by Ryo Murakami if you're interested in getting a kind of good look into the strange sex scene that might exist in Japan, and while also having a nice thriller mystery story kind of delved into it as well. Now, I recently did do a poll on the channel to see if you guys would want to vote on whatever books I could read in the future, and at the time of choosing whatever book I wanted to read, the choices were at a three-way tie. It was a tie between the two Stephen King novels, A Long Walk and The Gunslinger, and Thomas Harris's The Red Dragon. And I chose to read The Red Dragon because it was one of the books on the list I haven't read before. And I have seen the movie, though, but I don't think that would have changed my opinion on it because I wanted to see what the book had to offer rather than the movie. And I think the book does a little bit better job of delving into the characters' minds. Obviously, we get like the more internal monologue kind of descriptions, which you don't really get in the movies so much. But it's definitely fun so far. Red Dragon is the book that introduces Hannibal Lecter as a character into fiction. Obviously, this character has blown up a little more in popularity in the recent years, but this is where he made his first debut. Not even with Silence of the Lambs, the movie, which Red Dragon is the precursor, the prequel to Silence of the Lambs, just to give people a decent backstory. But it definitely seems like a fun read. I thought it'd be a nice change of pace to go from a more natural mystery thriller than in the Miso Soup or Ring or anything like that. Because Red Dragon, I think, is very fairly popular, at least here in the States and maybe on the more like European overseas side. But it seemed like a fun read. I've always seen it on my shelf. I never got a chance to read it. Like I said, I've seen the movie, so I know how the movie mostly ends compared to the book. So I'm excited to see what kind of differences there might be for this book. And yeah, that's really just it on what I'm going to read next is The Red Dragon. And not a whole lot is happening else this week. We got some TV shows which have started up. Uh, Marvel's Secret Invasion episode 2 dropped, which seems pretty cool. If anybody's following up on that, it seems like Nick Fury, is out of options. It's only episode 2, and it seems like he has a lot to try and take on. This seems like a much bigger threat than initially coveted or thought of, and that's cool. It's cool to see the stacks against Fury in one of his first ever like story. He seems to be backed to a corner by the end of this episode, and that seems really difficult for him. So that's nice. Um, Rhodey is a character, War Machine. He's in here, Rhodey Rhodes, and that's kind of cool. I'm interested to see where he goes. He's the only superhero or hero character that we've seen besides Fury in the show, and I hope that Rhodes is not the Skrull. I hope he's not a Skrull by the end of it. It's such a blatant, obvious pick for him to be the Skrull. I would just be appalled by it. Do something cool. Get some like other actor from some other sideshow and make them a Skrull or something. That's just me. There's I'm not really a big fan of the MCU stuff now. I just kind of feel like they're not connected. They all feel like such smaller side events for each other. Like it's called Secret Invasion, and it's just a Nick Fury story. That's just me, just comparing it a little too much to the comics. I still think it's fine. I'm gonna watch the episodes as they come out. And there's some other shows that have recently dropped. The Walking Dead had Fear the Walking Dead season 8 drop off a little while ago, and we got Dead City, which just started. And I'm liking these shows. I'm really liking these shows. Fear the Walking Dead has its tribulations. It has its hard times, like characters constantly going back and forth between traveling and just finding each other just in the midst of danger. There's a character who needs help, and then all of a sudden Morgan or someone else just comes along, and it happens a lot. It happens a lot, and it's definitely annoying. That's all I have to say about that. That's probably the most annoying thing about the show is how often they find each other and save each other, next to whether or not they decide on killing people or not. It's very difficult to care about these characters when they're so wishy-washy on what they want to do. Do they want to join Padre, work for Padre, destroy Padre? If you're up on season 8, you would know what I'm talking about. And eh, I don't think it's that great of a story. I think it's very different from the Fear the Walking Dead stories we've gotten in the middle of the season, but I definitely think it's better than the stories we've gotten in the beginning of the show. Um, Seasons 1 through 3 were like kind of okay. I think 4 through 7 were peak, absolute peak for the show, and 8 just kind of feels like meh. But that's all right. We're on a mid-season break for season 8 of Fear the Walking Dead, and that's okay. So hopefully the finale will have some more in terms of impactment or shock. It just kind of feels, pretty bland. Dead City also has its negativities, but its gleaming hope is Maggie and Negan being characters. Lauren Cohen and whoever plays Negan, they're definitely like the best parts of the show. And the villain seems pretty cool. He seems like a fun little shoe-in kind of villain just to propel the story. Because the story didn't need to happen. It never needed to happen as far as I could tell, right? It takes place after The Walking Dead, obviously. And there is a hook in the story where Maggie loses her kid. And we don't see it. We never see it in the show previous, or the current Dead City show. But this is like the second or third time her kid's been kidnapped, if you count the times from the regular Walking Dead show. And it's just like, we're really doing this again. We're really doing it again. That's okay. I understand that like having Negan and the actor that plays him is probably like the most prolific actor still on the show, at least, but next to Daryl, who got his own show. And then the woman who plays Maggie, Lauren Cohen, is very good at what she does, and I think that this arc for her is going to be really good. You know, where this show ends up, I think is fairly foreseeable. I think it's easy to see where this show ends up. I think Maggie might die. I think Maggie would be the one to die by the end. That's just me. Um, it's cool to see these shows, keep going. I hope they don't go on for too long. I swear to God, if they announce Dead City season 2, I will flip out. There shouldn't be a Dead City season 2 because we're already getting like the Daryl show and whatever else. I think Fear the Walking Dead, this is literally the final season. So yeah, that's really on the Walking Dead stuff because they're not even over yet, the shows, but I wanted to just talk about them, tell you what I thought about. Zombies seem to have taken a back turn, at least in Dead City. You don't see a whole lot of them, at least for now. We're on episode 3 for Dead City, but it definitely feels like the zombies aren't that big of a deal here. But yeah, that's it for this week. There really isn't that much to talk about. I might want to try and watch the new Children of the Corn movie that dropped out on AMC Plus. If you guys got this far in the episode and you're interested to seeing or hearing what I think about that movie, leave a like or comment and let me know if you would want to hear that. And there isn't much else coming out, I don't think, in the foreseeable future besides Pikmin. So besides Red Dragon and playing Warhammer Space Marine, that's probably all it's going to be on for next episode. And then from there, we will see what the universe has in store for us. This has been episode 15 of the Gamer Librarian podcast. Be sure to subscribe for updates on future episode releases. Leave a like and comment on what games or books I should talk about in the future. Thank you, and see you next time.